So it's end of June. We're officially in summer, and Florida has finished preheating. This is our dwarf saltbush that we installed when we first moved in a little over a year ago. Our blue porterweed is expressing all sorts of blooms finally. Seems like it's well established and happy. I've had to prune this a couple times to keep it contained, but otherwise I'm very happy with it there. The small leaf square stem is back to full blooms, just busting constantly with blooms, flowers, pollen, nectar for insects, 365 days. We added a Rudbeckia hirta, var. Floridana, which is our native, I really dislike the name, but black-eyed Susan is what most people know it as. And you can see the Florida version has a much tinier flower. You know, it's very conservative for our heat and dry conditions here. Starry rosin flower is shining. This didn't do much the first whole year it was in the ground. It is stunningly gorgeous now, putting out a ton of blossoms. The snowy milkweed does what snowy milkweed does. Asclepias perennis. This just blooms and seeds all year long. Prairie coneflower has been foraged on a couple times by some sort of herbivore and eaten down to nothing. We added a Scutellaria integrifolia, I believe that is, here. That was bare root transplanted. It was already blooming when we transplanted it, but it's hanging in there. This is the kidney leaf rosin flower, which has already bloomed this year. It was kind of a short, uneventful bloom cycle. I really would not select that over starry rosin flower. The lance leaf tick seed, you know, blooms and seeds, blooms and seeds, blooms and seeds. Spreads a little, but we're so happy to have the flatwood sunflower back blooming. You know, sunflowers, Helianthus genus, keystone for native bee pollen specialists, 50 species. Eat when this plant is available and blooming and providing pollen. So it's one of our favorites. And this one's endangered, but it is significantly more drought tolerant than narrowleaf sunflower, and it doesn't spread via roots. We did add some Stokes aster back there. They bloomed for us. This is Florida green eyes, Berlandaria subicalis, and lance leaf Indian blanket flower has just bloomed non-stop since, well, probably since winter when we planted it, maybe a month after we planted it. And we've gotten several groupings of seeds and planted some seedlings we hope to share with you all soon. Cutleaf coneflower, busting with blooms. I don't even think this is peak bloom cycle here. And then we have a remnant seedling that volunteered from our previous fairy hibiscus we pulled out of here. Here's another one over here. So, you know, they're dainty. You'd probably think those were weeds if you didn't know what they were. But it makes little red flowers that attract hummingbirds. It's an endangered South Florida species. It likes to be in the shade, and it can handle more alkaline soils than other former hibiscus species could. Slender or wand goldenrod, Solidago stricta, had put up some bloom spikes, but it's really early, so we pruned those a little bit just to make it bush a little bit more and make the flowers more abundant. Back here we added some purple cone flowers, and they're starting to put out some growth. That looks like that might even be a flower spike forming. That's pretty cool. The wild petunia has bloomed several times throughout spring with its gorgeous lavender flowers. The other dwarf saltbush, I mean, look at how large this thing has gotten. Look at how large this thing has gotten, you know, from the 6-inch-ish plant that we, you know, it was like that big when we planted it a year and a half ago. Pretty nice. And I don't even water these. When I water, I skip them entirely. So these are all surviving perfectly on their own. And then back here we added some orange coneflower, Rudbeckia fulgida, continuing to work on getting to know all of the various keystone species representatives native to Florida that I can grow in my particular zone. So Rudbeckia being on that list, Helianthus. So we also, on that theme, added a Rudbeckia triloba, or brown-eyed Susan. Poor Susan. And So this is pretty neat. I'm seeing only really tiny bees on these, which is neat to see a new diversity of wildlife coming around. And down here we added a Palafoxia, I believe, Fayei. We added 2 false pennyroyals for nice spring blooms for our spring early rising bees, like blueberry bees, although I don't know that we have them here, but I'm sure going to make sure we have food if they ever show up. And this is Chrysopsis mariana, or Maryland golden aster, which is typically a more fall peak bloom cycle, but it is expressing some blooms here now. In end of spring, early summer, it felt like, my patience had run out on the Simpson stopper that was here, so we replaced this with a Spanish stopper, which I'd been interested in getting to know better anyway. And I did put in a rattlesnake master here, and I have big plans for this bed. Stay tuned. Over here we have the large flower false rosemary, Conradina grandiflora, false pennyroyal. Also added some Ratibida columnifera, which is also known as prairie coneflower, but there is another Ratibida species, Ratibida pinnata, that's more commonly available. This one supposedly likes a little more moisture than Ratibida pinnata. So I planted this next to the downspout of the gutters. We also have a cardinal flower here, which died back and just started expressing foliage a month or 2 ago. And we added a blue lobelia here, or Everglades lobelia. And the firebush is expressing tons of blooms, looking lovely. We have a musky or clustered bush mint here in the back, and this bloomed throughout the winter. I mostly saw wasps nectaring on this particular species, which I'm about it too. Down here we added a smooth aster, Symphyiotrichum leve. And here we have a soft hair coneflower. This is the second one that I planted after the first one out front over in the corner, which died after it bloomed and seeded. So I went ahead and planted another one while that one was blooming, and this one is now busting with blooms. This is Eastern Smoothleaf Aster, and then the other Eastern Smoothleaf Aster used to be here, just turned brown and died a few weeks ago. This is a Georgia Aster, Symphyiotrichum georgiana, which hasn't done much but a little bit of foliage since last year, when it had one single flower spike. The fiddlewood seems to be thriving. It's putting out its second huge flush of blooms. A couple of those are open now. And these are super fragrant, aromatic. You can smell them downwind. And down here we have a wild plumbago, because I'm a sucker for blue butterflies, and wild plumbago can be as wild as it wants. I'll find the spot that can handle that, because I love having Cassius blues fluttering around my yard. There are other host plants for Cassius blues, like Keys blackbead, that may be better behaved or better suited for full sun, dry conditions, and we have some Keys blackbead here now. This is crenulated lead plant, Amorpha herbacea var crenulata. This is a South Florida federally listed endangered species, only found in Miami-Dade County. There are other Amorpha herbaceas that would be locally native here, but this is just such a cool plant. We just got some seeds off this. We're hoping to find adoptive parents in the Miami-Dade area especially to send those out to. Ovate leaf Indian plantain. It's putting out its second batch of blooms, which isn't as large and spectacular as the first batch, but it's definitely popular with the insects and beautiful. There's more flowers on the crenulated lead plant. See how they're a white instead of orange color? And then I completely skipped over the false indigo, which is also blooming. This is the second flush of blooms that I've had this year. But I just love the purples, the browns, the hints of orange at the tips. I mean, it's just kind of stunning. And false indigo probably likes drier conditions than crenulate lead plant. Crenulate lead plant would stay about this tall though, whereas false indigo will reach up to my roof eventually. Probably need to prune that back a little bit. So you always want to choose the right plant for the place where you're going to be happy with it long term. The frostweed, which hasn't done much since last year, is currently expressing a few blooms and getting ready to express blooms. The peak bloom time for these is more fall winter. Frostweed can get about 8 feet tall. It is a keystone pollen source in the Verbicina genus for pollen specialist bees. It gets pretty big, and it can reseed significantly and germinates very well from seed. So, you know, it's maybe not for the faint-hearted gardener that likes tidiness and orderliness, but for people that are on Save the Native Bees mission, it might be an essential component. Now, button sage is one of our 3 native lantana species. We have 3 that are native to Florida, possibly more, some like subtypes or varieties of one of the others. Of those 3, this is the only one that is drought tolerant and stable everywhere in dry and warm conditions. This particular one is also somewhat salt tolerant. It blooms 365 days a year, just non-stop fruits and blooms, and they can come in with a little pink tinge like this, or they can be totally white in terms of the flower color. And then it also forms these lovely purple berries that birds or small mammals, who knows, snacks on. When the leaves are disrupted, unlike other lantanas, it smells more like sage. I think that's where the name button sage maybe is associated, I'm not sure. And these will get about 6 feet tall. They'll grow in full sun, and they'll grow in partial shade. I've even seen them growing in almost entirely shade, very, very lush and beautiful. I've always used it as a full sun plant. It's a great for privacy hedges where 6 feet height is your desired height. And down here we added some Cape Sable thoroughwort. This is the Oakley fleabane still hanging in there. Here we have some more Tampa verbena, and there's more over here, which we just recently kind of spread out into this new extension of the planting zone. We added a silverling baccharis, which is an 8-foot member of the baccharis genus. Again, dwarf saltbush that was out front. Here we added a Virginia sweetspire, and I don't know if that was a great idea. This is kind of a wetland species. We'll see how it does. These were both, again, bare root transplanted at initial planting. We also added some Puricutta, and these have bloomed numerous times for us here with their little yellow blossoms. And I just met this plant on a nature walk with Craig Hegel very recently. I think it was the Kissimmee Prairie walk where we saw these. Over here we have the beautyberry, which is still expressing blooms and also producing berries right at the same time. And this was very tiny when we planted it. I've pruned it pretty hard once already to select which branches I really wanted to encourage to make it more tree-like, I guess. These are our lovely seed-grown button bush looking for forever homes. Looking lovely. Everybody that walks by this just is stunned at how gorgeous it is. This is a full-grown 7-gallon Darrow's blueberry loaded with berries, and they're not bad. And this is one of our vaccinium species that hosts 162 species of moths, and possibly some of those are butterflies, but mostly moths. And it's an essential pollen source for the blueberry bee, which is our most rare, I believe, imperiled native bee species here in Florida, that's only active in the spring. And They specialize in blueberries, so we always have to have some blueberries. I think it's like 14 native bee species that eat pollen or nectar from blueberries. And the Carolina jessamine, doing Carolina jessamine things, providing us a little bit of shade here in the carport as we expected. This is a 1 gallon plant that we planted down here. Of course, I'm sure there's some fertilizer leaching from pots into that zone, so it's being fed. And over here, the coral honeysuckle is putting on a show. I've not seen any hummingbirds yet, really, or butterflies, because sometimes I've seen monarch's nectar on these in the past. Our park here is strangely absent of wildlife. And over here we added a Solidago mexicana, seaside goldenrod. And you can see that already is, 3 feet tall. That was a 1 gallon plant. Man, these things really take off when you put them in the ground. They don't look like much in a pot though.